Whatcha know, Joe?
I don't know nothing.
Whatcha know, Joe?
Tell me something.
Whatcha know, Joe?
Hi, and welcome to the Whatcha Know Joe podcast, a very special edition of the Whatcha Know Joe podcast. Because all you young filmmakers out there who can drop names and talk about movies, if you don't know this lady, if you don't know what she does, you're just passing through. I give you the incredible Midge Costin. Midge, you blew my mind with this. This isn't only recommended. In my world, this should be mandatory viewing, not only at USC, but any film school. You know, Midge, I've always been interested in how people know what they want to do with their lives. Eric Clapton knew he wanted to play guitar. Derek Jeter wanted to be a shortstop. I have a nephew who's wanted to be a surgeon since he's 8 years old. Me, I'm still looking for my place in life. But this kid knew at 8 years old, and he's now one of the leading hand surgeons. How does somebody at your level of talent and expertise, was sound always a driving force in your life, or did you discover it?
Yeah, thanks, Joe, and that introduction was over the top. Love it. No, and I tell my students this all the time. The last thing, I did go to film school. The last thing I thought I would do coming out of film school was sound. But this is what I knew I wanted to be. My father was a great storyteller, and he used to read us Grimm's, tales and Hans Christian Andersen and stuff before we went to bed at night. And then I used to tell my little sister stories every night when she couldn't go to sleep. They were the Yogi the Bear stories. But and I knew I love storytelling. I love stories. And I went to USC, and then I figured out I didn't like being on the set. It was too chaotic for me. I can't really multitask. I don't really know if multitasking really is real. So I like being in a room, doing my thing, putting a story together. So I came out and I was I was apprentice editor on picture editing, assistant editor, and I'm working my way up. And I'm working on my thesis film. It's the only thing I have left to do. And my friend, Dan Hageman, who I cut a student film with, had become a sound editor. And he said, he called me up one day and said, Midge, none of the union guys at the sound house will touch, with Chameleon Sound, none of the union guys will touch 16 millimeter. And a big producer, what's her name, Betty Thomas, who brings them a lot of work, brought this after school kids special. And he said, none of the union guys will touch 16 millimeter. Well, that's what we did at school at USC. So he said, if you come in, I'll show you how to cut effects. And I always tell my students this, I'm very honest. So I lowered myself and took a sound job, because there are hierarchies, and you always think of sound as like, when I came to USC to teach even, they had all of the class descriptions were visual medium, visual storytelling. And I asked when I came there, can you put visual and oral? And so I went on this, so I took this job, and then I realized, oh my God, I'm the person who is, Dan's cutting dialogue, because it was a little more complicated if you don't understand it. And so he's cutting the production sound, and I'm cutting all the background, the ambience, the effects. So I'm thinking story, because that's what I love. How do I reflect character? How do I reflect mood and tone? How do I reflect the environment? How do I get the plot points with thinking just in terms of sound? So right away it became like, okay, and I dove in. And then they kept me on because I was making so little money. And I didn't even know how to use a 35 millimeter splicer, and I was making $400 a week. And so I just went on to the next picture. And then an editor that I knew called me up, and I had assisted for it. And he was going on to a TV show, and he said, Midge, I just have the opticals to put into this show. Would you take my place? And I said, who's doing the sound? Now I've worked on 1.5 movies for sound. And I said, who's doing the sound? And he said, we don't know yet. And I said, I'll take the job if I can be supervising sound editor. Now, the only reason I did that, Joe, is I had enough friends who I had gone to film school with, who were close friends, who were supervising sound editors, and I knew I could get help, because you can't take something if you can't make deadlines and stuff. So you can't bullshit. You'll never work in this town again. But even on that first show, it was like I realized the importance of sound, and I got into it, and then it was so fun, you know. And I was learning on the job, because I felt like I didn't pay attention to it at school. I thought it was something you did at the end of the movie, and it was just a technical thing, and that's why, you know, it's like I am a born again sound person. I played the guitar, and I was always on in chorus or choir, you know, and so I love to sing, and so I think that having an ear for sound helped, you know, and I think that that's why. And then it was just really fun, you know. It was trying to figure out how to make the story better, and thinking of story in terms of sound. And it opened up my ears, but opened up my world, even in just like everyday life. I started to listen to sound more.
Yeah, no, I have had a similar, not at your level, but a similar experience. But what I wanted to tell you was, the night Saving Private Ryan opened, I was in the theater in Van Nuys, and it was crowded. But I looked around at what was strange is like the whole 80%, 90% of the audience were guys in their 70s. And the movie started, and that incredible battle scene, and now suddenly I'm hearing a different sound. I'm hearing some of these guys crying. And I realized that the picture and the sound had brought back their experience. These guys, some of these guys must have been at Normandy, and it brought it back vividly to them, and it really moved them. And I thought, wow, that's a whole other level.
Wow, that's so moving. I know, right? Yeah. It's hard. It's a hard scene, but it's just so beautifully done. And the sound plays such a big part. As you know, Gary says, it's because like the view of where it was really small, but you could hear everything around, you know, and then those sounds because you think, oh, we're underwater, thank God, we're free, right? And then those zinging bullets,
I know.
Like you can't get away.
Thank God I've never been in combat, but it moved me, scared me. I thought, oh my God, how do guys do this? How do people do this? So it was a remarkable job. You've had some interesting mentors. Somebody stand out to you over and above that, boy? Because I think along our journey, our path, there's always somebody who lifts us up or helps us at the right moments.
Well, you know, it was really people that I was at film school with. So it's not, you know, because people wouldn't know their names, but like Dan Hageman was the first one to bring me into sound. And then my friend Hudson Miller was I met him in the edit room at USC. And then as I started to work, like R.J. Palmer, Terry Dorman, who's in the movie, you know, I worked a lot with Suhail Cafferty, who also teaches at USC, Richard Burton, you know, and it was like we're all learning, because so much, like I remember some of my movies were stereo, you know, but when my first union picture was Days of Thunder, and Hudson got me on that movie, and it was 5.1. And we were all learning, because most movies had been done, you know, stereo, and I mean, even some mono people were working in. And so we're all like kind of figuring out at the same time. And so it was really just figuring it out on the job, and sometimes in asking each other. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this too, and that's why the whole last half hour of the movie is how we do it and the people, because I love these people. And it's like, as I tell my students, the most important thing that I teach is show up on time, do what you say you're going to do, make your deadlines. When you finish your job, help somebody else. That's how you're going to get work. And but it's like you're a team. If you're not a good collaborator, you're not going to be a filmmaker, because nobody really makes a film on their own. I mean, maybe some, I don't even know, animated shorts or some shorts, they think they are, but the best films are made by really good collaborative crews and filmmakers.
100%. And that's why I think your film and you, and even this interview, is so valuable to young filmmakers. Because, you know, at SC, the camera is God. the camera is God. But the camera is only one element of filmmaking, and it's not the element of filmmaking that everybody thinks it is. When I first got to USC,
Yeah.
there was a gentleman there named Tom Holman. And one day Tom said to me, I'm experimenting with sound, come see this. So I went, thought it would be better attended. There were only about 20 of us. The room got dark, and they started to play Ave Maria. First from in front, then it moved around, and suddenly it was overhead, and it just blew my mind. When the lights came on, I said, Tom, I've never experienced anything like that. It was amazing to me.
What you're saying about hearing the sound around, okay, a lot of people think it's all about the technology, but the way that things advanced are filmmakers saying, I want to do this. Is it possible to do this? So it was Francis Ford Coppola hearing music that was quad sound, that he said, I'd like my movie to do that, and that was Apocalypse Now. The mixers and the sound designer, Walter Murch, the only thing he had ever done is monofilm. He had never even mixed or supervised for a stereo film, let alone 5.1. And so it's really that the film. It's really the filmmakers and the ideas and the. I want the audience to experience this. That's how the technology moves forward. But I learned everything I have to learn technically because I'm so excited about what I can do for story, for character, for plot points that, the more immersive we get, I think the better, that kind of thing. That's what really should drive you. And the other thing I just want to say, because you were saying about collaboration and to younger people and filmmakers, here's the deal. They've been hearing it for a long time in Avid or their editing program. And then they get scared and they start asking, oh, could you take that out? Could you lower that? And I start seeing them go backwards. And I'll go, hey, let's just think about it. Maybe it's because you didn't hear it before. I felt more emotion, or I felt, the mood and the tone better when it was. And it's not sound for sound's sake. It's sound for the, for the movie, for the story.
I think a lot of people listen, but not everybody hears. And speaking of collaboration, I don't like to throwing guys' names around, but one of the things about Ryan Coogler that I admired is his ability to take input, digest other points of view, because sometimes somebody you don't even know has a good idea.
Ryan did sound before he directed, and because he told me that he didn't know, that was the thing he knew least about. And so, and he was great because whatever he does well, and he really got into it. And then he told me, he turned down Black Panther so many times until he could finally be part of the writing process. And then the first thing he said he had to do was go to Africa, so I have so much respect for that guy. He always wants to, make sure he really understands the story and the characters and make them his own.
Yeah, no, he's terrific. I want to go transition because you said something about music, and it's funny. I was in the movies the other day, and when you look at Martin Scorsese's ability to use music to move his story, and then you see directors who think that's the miracle cure, but don't have the same instincts, and then suddenly the music is an intrusion. It's a distraction. It's a false note. How in God's green earth in a mixing room do you marry music, effects, dialogue so that they don't get in each other's way? Your film said that sound mixing is probably the most difficult, time-consuming, point-specific of all the editing processes. You'd agree with that?
It really depends on the movie and what's entailed, because sometimes it could also be just designing the sounds, or recording them, then designing them. Then sometimes you're making creature vocals and they make all the difference, like Star Wars. Yeah, the mix is like amazing, but also they had to come up with the whole idea of coming up with these voices, from like R2D2 that doesn't even speak, but he's got to sound like he's speaking. So it really depends, but the pulling it all together is a really crucial process. This is what I say. Sound, usually, you're going to make the picture better no matter what, right? You're going to make the picture better. But music is so powerful that if you get it wrong, you can totally screw up the picture, as you're saying. So for directors, this is what you want to know. Where are the in points and where are the out points? Because sometimes on shorts, like student films, it's like once they hear music, anyone can, the composers can do a 5-minute thing. But if you do 5 minutes of music all the way through, it loses the effect of the music. So you have to have dynamic range. You need to have the quiet moments, the louder moments, so they work, and then the music's the same thing. Where do you want it to start? Where do you want it to end? And what are you trying to say? So you don't have to know instrumentation, music, you don't have to know musical, language. You just have to know what you want the audience to feel. And then, and then maybe the most important thing is silence, The best directors, so all the directors who I have in Making Waves, who really, the best directors for sound, right? You collaborate. So the composer meets with the supervising sound editor, sound designer. You give each other examples of what you're doing. You might work with each other because you might need, like your effects might need to be in a certain key, it might need to be a certain note to work with the music, or the music the other way. So you have to know, how you're working together. But too many times, like in my career, it would be, we'd go to the mix stage, the final mix stage, and it's like there's music and there's effects. And like on a montage, we would always cut things, even though we knew it was a music montage, in case they didn't like the music, So when you're both covering things and you don't understand who's supposed to cover this, that's not great. And then in the mix, that's when you make a decision, like what should it be? And I remember Pat Jackson telling me she convinced the director to take out like sound effects and just use the music, And so it's like you can't hold on to your, too many times it would be like the supervising sound editor is fighting with the composer. You don't want that, It should be what's best for the story. And when you work together, like I remember hearing the Coen brothers say about No Country for Old Men. They did a spotting session. They edit their own film. So it's the Coen brothers. Carter Burwell is their composer, and Skip Leafsay is always their supervising sound editor. And when they watched the picture, Carter said to Skip, "This is your movie, like take it away." And there's hardly any music cues at all in No Country for Old Men. And that's the kind of thing that's the kind of collaboration that you want.
So how does somebody start out to make this movie? You wake up one morning and say, hey, it's Tuesday, I'll raise $1 million and make this movie, and it'll take me God knows how long. That takes a lot of courage, a lot of drive, a lot of self-belief, which I admire and applaud you for. But then having the instincts to make a very watchable, informative, entertaining film. How does that even happen? You just wake up and say, I think I'll make a movie.
Yeah, I wanted to make the movie for a very long time. From the time that I got into sound, when I realized, wow, the importance of it, and it became a career for me, and I thought, people don't know. Like, I think of myself when I was in film school and how I wasn't really paying attention to sound, and that I want to give everybody a leg up. So I really wanted to make this movie. And so I waited until I thought, we could get the resources. And also it was I thought, I don't want to preach to the choir. I want it to be a general audience loves this film and discovers sound the way that I feel like I did. So I knew I needed big filmmakers, names who would, attract attention. And then I knew we needed big film. So this is what happened. I started in 2000 to work on this film, and I was, and then what I realized is there was no such thing as fair use. So we couldn't use clips. And I also knew we needed clips of mainstream films, So then in 2010, Bobette Buster, who was teaching at USC, she had been one of the ones who helped get fair use. And so in 2010, suddenly it was, if you can transform a clip and not just make money off it same way that the filmmakers made money, like for entertainment value, then if you can transform it, then you can use it and only use it so much, of it. So we were looking for funding and all that stuff, and then we found out that somebody else was, I can't say who, but a big sound company was kind of, do I say stealing our idea? But anyways, we had gone to them for money. So we jumped in, and the first person that I got, big name, was, thank you, Mary Sweeney, was David Lynch. And when you get you get a filmmaker like David Lynch, everybody, even filmmakers, want to be involved, And I could say, yeah, I interviewed David Lynch, and would like to get, and I knew I could get Spielberg and Lucas because they're, on the board at USC, and they've been very friendly, and I have an endowed chair from them, and so they said yes early on, and then just filmmakers that I love, Peter Weir. Oh my God, he was so wonderful. Ang Lee, I mean, and then the Barbara Streisand was the most interesting because she doesn't do many films. And I know some people that too, some big directors, documentaries, who she was going to be in their films, and then she sees the film and then she pulls herself out. She doesn't think it's up to her standards or whatever. She didn't know that she held this really important part in sound history, that she helped the studios everyone decide that they wanted to go from mono to Dolby stereo, or stereo with noise reduction. Dolby sound noise reduction in stereo was only in music, so everybody was listening to music in a much better, more sophisticated, professional sounding than it was in the movies. And so Yoan went to Ray Dolby and said, Ray, what about if we get into movies? And he goes, you can check it out. So Yoan goes around to all the studio heads, and they'd listen and they'd say, sounds interesting, but I mean, you can imagine how much money it was going to be to switch from mono to stereo in theaters and in production, everything. So they said, sounds good, but we don't really need it. And then Stanley Kubrick was making Clockwork Orange, Barbara Streisand was making A Star Is Born, and George Lucas was making Star Wars. And when he went to all of them, because the studio heads were saying no, they said, oh, we'd like this. And Barbara Streisand thought it was already in existence. And she was making so much money for the studios that they said, okay. And, and so she was thrilled to hear that. She didn't know she was part of history. And she was thrilled to be in the company of Kubrick and Lucas, and she deserves that. So, she was great.
Yeah, Midge, it's exceptional. You're exceptional. You're wonderful to do this. It's lovely to see you.
Oh, Joe, yeah. Great to see you, too. Well, you have a great career of your own, too. You know what? Anyone who has as much hands-on experience as you do, it's like you have a lot to teach. So that's what's good, is getting the real, people who've really done the jobs and stuff and really understand the industry.
Maybe,
so
I don't know. Maybe we'll do Making More Waves. You never could tell. Thanks, Midge. Great to see you.
That'd be great. All right. Thanks, Joe. Take care. Really good to see you.